What is going down, my YouTube family? It is your boy Zary from the XMG coming at you today on this beautiful post St. Patrick's Day morning to bring you the next installment in the tier list, Pandas. So I have to say that I'm sorry that I don't know what the hell happened with the elf video. I actually had to re-edit the whole thing, so probably going to get 2 videos out of me today. If not, and you're seeing this on Thursday, I got busy. But before we get into the next part of the tier list, if you're not part of the XMG family, become part of that XMG family. Hit the subscribe button, shooting for that goal of 650 subs. Everything that goes along with it, I don't need to repeat myself, you all know. So let's get into it. As we do, we'll just take a quick review of where we are at on the tier list. So here's what we're looking like on the tier list. We have 1 legendary, we have 4 rares, 2 uncommons, 5 commons, and 3 trash characters, champions, whatever you'd like to call them. So let's take a look and see what we're looking like for pandas. So let's get right into it because it's a long faction. All right, so we got the pandas behind us here. So let's start off with Lake. Okay, Lake is a fighter, mage, and a leader. He is a newer character. He can be found in the tournament shop. So some things I like about Lake is, 1, his kit. First ability, magic damage, 70% chance to inflict tenacity down, which helps put on those debuffs. He has an affinity with burning, which is good for the Ember synergy, deals magical damage, and then deals an extra 50% magic damage for each burning stack that is removed from this move. And then it has a potency decrease for 2 turns, 50% shot. Gonna have to go through both potency and tenacity checks. Then he has, if he doesn't take damage, he gains haste, which speeds him up, which is really cool. And then he gives himself an accuracy increase and debuff immunity for 2 turns, recovers 30% of his health. And then if Ember is there, she gets a damage increase. So his kit is built very well. He does have to go through the double potency and tenacity check, but his potency to start is at 75%. You can really just focus on getting potency in those secondary stats. You don't have to really put a rune onto him, like in the Northwestern rune, for instance, all potency. You can probably get that pretty damn close to 100% without doing that. So that's a huge plus. His magic damage is at 28.29 to start. It's not terrible, but it's not the best, so that's kind of a plus and a minus. Critical chance at 23.9%. Does have a base speed of 157, so that gives us something really good to start off with. His health and shield combined are over 40,000 to start, so he has pretty good survivability to begin with. That's what I really like about Lake. What I don't really care for about Lake is, 1, his leadership. All pandas gain 1,000 penetration. Each time a panda ally counterattacks, they recover health by 100% of the damage dealt. So it has a heal in there for health, which is good because Patriarch really just focuses primarily on shield. But there's only 2 pandas that counterattack, so this could be definitely for something down the line. But as it stands right now, it's a pretty crappy leadership. Also, Lake really doesn't kind of have a place in the team, because if you're running a full panda team and you have everything unlocked here, you're running Kinley, you're running Patriarch, you're running Rin the Unseen, you're running Ember. Now you could put Lake in there and he could do great, or you could put Foul for the dodge increase. So he doesn't have like a set in there. You mean the first 4 I mentioned, you're definitely running with a panda team if you have them all, hands down. So let's see where Lake comes in for me. Lake for me definitely comes in at the uncommon stage. He is definitely above a common character, brings some good stuff, but he doesn't really do a lot to set him apart. The fact that his leadership is subpar and he is geared for a leader at this point in the game definitely makes him uncommon. He does have a lot of potential and is worth some time and investment, but there are definitely some better characters in the panda faction I would focus on first. Next up on the list, we have Patriarch. He is a healer and a leader. Patriarch is an extremely good character, but he does have some flaws, which we're going to go over. But let's start with what I like. What I really like about Patriarch is his 4th ability, Meditation, where he gives armor increase to all allies. Definitely huge for the survivability of your team. His passive ability, when applying a shield, Patriarch has a 40% chance to heal an ally by 30% of the shield, which is good because they don't have a healer in a full panda team, so that is definitely big. And his Fortitude is amazing. He's replenishing the shield equal to 700% of his magic damage, and then he's dispelling 2 debuffs on that ally as well. So definitely huge. And then to sprinkle it all in, his basic ability, he deals magic damage, but then he has a 50% chance for Kinley and a random ally to gain shield. So he's doing something more on his basic, which is really, really huge. Now his base stats for health and shield combined are right around 51,000. So that is huge for him. Some drawbacks for this character for sure are his base speed of 127 is tank, defender range, so that is really not that good for him. And then his magic damage is at 2658. So definitely want to focus on speed, and you want to focus on damage with this character. He is fantastic. He increases the survivability of any team, and he is a plug-and-play character. So let's see where Patriarch ranks for me. Now, Patriarch, fantastic, can be used in a lot of different game modes. Definitely comes in as a rare. Now, his low base speed and his magic damage can be compensated for with runes, and having him have such good survivability to start means you can just focus on those in the secondary stats. So definitely a rare character, plug and play viability on pretty much any team, and has some really good synergies outside of the Panda faction with the shield and the healing. So that is why Patriarch comes in at a rare for me. Alright, next up on the list we have Kinley. Kinley is a Panda defender and a leader. I grew quite fond of Kinley when I did the new series, and then definitely from the Renara event. And Kinley is a really, really good defender. Some things I really, really like about Kinley is that to start at gear 11, 7 stars, blah, 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 he has almost 60,000 health and shield combination, so he already starts out real tanky. His speed is kind of subpar at 105, even for a defender, so you're going to have to sink the speed into the northeastern rune to kind of get him up to that 125, 130 range. His armor is extremely good to start, above 30% in both categories. So, and he does have high critical chance for a defender, which is not the best thing in the world, but it's okay. You know, it's just kind of another plus for him. But then you also look at his move kit. On his basic, if the target is at full health, it's guaranteed to land a critical hit. Okay, so not the best, not the worst. Kind of a plus and a minus, but he is doing something else on his basic, which we love to see. His second ability, Jade Wave, he applies a tenacity increase at a 50% chance to 3 allies for 1 turn. So increasing tenacity is huge, which we all know. His 5-on-1, which is his taunting mechanism, he gains taunt and a dodge increase for 2 turns. He's also removing 2 debuffs and recovering 25% of his health. So as he goes, he's taunting, dodging, taking 2 debuffs off himself and restoring health. You really can't ask for a better taunting mechanism in this game, and it could be the best taunting mechanism in the game, tied with Little Baddie in my opinion. Then his passive, to top it all off for a defender, he's gaining another 20% health by just his turn coming up. Great passive ability. And then his leadership is fantastic for pandas. The best panda leadership, which I severely underrated in a lot of my earlier videos. But what he does is he's giving them maximum health, and then he's having them recover 5% of their health for each critical hit dealt or a buff applied. And it is a very buff-heavy team, and he has high critical chance. You put in an Ember and a Rin the Unseen, you want them to crit. So all in all, this is a extremely good kit. This is a defender's dream kit, and his leadership complements what he already brings to the table. So let's see where I have Kinley ranked. So when looking at Kinley, and this might shock you, I have Kinley as a rare. He is a low rare, but he has definitely sets himself apart from an uncommon character. He is not a high tier rare, he is a low tier rare. For the simple reason that his kit is built so well for a defender. He gives you the best lead for the Panda faction. He is just one of the best tanks. You get him early in the game. Just a all-around great character for what he brings to the faction of Pandas. And then as a character himself, we really can't ask for much more out of Kinley. So he is a very, very good character and a low-tier rare, in my opinion. Next up on the list, we have Hilda. She is another defender, a traveler. So what Hilda brings to the table, which is some good things, is that to start, her health and shield combination are already over 50k. That is huge. Now, she does have a taunting mechanism, but she is more of a faux tank than a regular defender or tank. And what it does is it does decrease turn meter by 20% when she uses it, so a turn meter reduction on her taunting mechanism is very good. Her basic ability is kind of meh. We get shield equal back to that damage, which ties into her passive ability, which again I think is kind of bad, where she increases the size of her maximum shield by 15,000. And that's nice if you're pairing her with a Patriarch. You can keep her topped off, but all in all, I just feel it's a subpar passive, and I wish it did something a little different. Now, her Spear Throw is a really cool ability because she deals physical damage, and then she gains an armor increase and a tenacity increase, definitely helping her out if you pop that taunt on her, keeping her survive a little longer. Now, her speed is at a 122, and she is like a secondary tank for the team, so you do want to add a little bit more speed to her. Also, her physical damage is 28,000 or 2,800, right in that range, so not terrible, but not the best. She does have a lower critical chance, and her potency is at a 0. She doesn't really need it, but potency at a 0. And the other thing is her armor is very good. So let's see where she ranks. Now, like I was saying, Hilda isn't an overly crazy character. She is definitely made for PvE environment. I've seen her used in some PvP teams, but she usually goes down pretty quick. And she isn't really a top tier option, in my opinion. Now, some people might prove me wrong, but I have Hilda definitely coming in as a common character. She is definitely not trash, but she definitely really doesn't do a whole hell of a lot to push her up to uncommon. She is a good secondary tank, but in the Panda faction, where are we putting her in on that team? I'm not giving up a slot for Rin the Unseen. I'm not giving up a slot for Ember. Kinley and Patriarch are the two pillars of that team, and I'd much rather put in even a Foul over a Hilda in that aspect. So she is definitely just your subpar common character, good for PvE environments. That's where I have her sitting. Next up on the list, we have Ember. Ember is a fighter mage and a gladiator. Now, Ember is a exceptional character. She brings a lot of good things to the table. So let's take a look and see. Just starting off with some stats. She has a base speed of 160. Awesome. Her magical damage is at 3117 to start. Her health and shield combination is at 48,000 to start. Potency's at 33%. Definitely seen worse, but definitely seen better. So that's kind of a plus and a minus. And her critical chance is only at 20.6%. So kind of on the lower side, especially for a mage. But on her move kit, her basic ability, she relies heavily on the burn effect, but she can do 300% of magic damage on her basic if they are burned. She has a stun effect on her meteor, but it's guaranteed on one of the tenacity and potency checks, so we only have to roll it once. So that is huge. Then she has her Spirit of Zainiao, which deals 250% and gives you a 70% chance to inflict burning for 2 turns, and then a 30% chance to remove all buffs from enemies. So we have the double potency tenacity check on both of those. But the fact that she has the potential to remove all buffs is absolutely phenomenal. And then her passive is subpar in my opinion. For each burning stack on the enemy, she recovers 6% of her health at the start of her turn. Now, if that was like a 6% damage increase for each burning stack, or even a 2% damage increase, that would be awesome. But to make this more viable, I wish it was higher health. I mean, 6% of her health, maybe 10% or 15%. We've definitely seen that on way worse characters than an Ember. So that's a big drawback for me in her kit. And one thing I did forget to mention is that her magic armor is phenomenal to start. Just great. So where is Ember going to come in for me? Ember's coming in for me on my tier list at a rare. She could be a legendary if a couple things in my mind happened. And that would be if, one, she had a higher percent chance to remove all buffs, a 30% chance on that roll, and then going through the next roll of the potency tenacity check is very, very stringent. If that was higher, maybe a 50% chance completely maxed out, that would increase her viability. And the fact that she does need burn and her potency is lower puts her at a rare. She is much like Freezard to me, very top tier rare, but not enough to push her into the legendary category. Okay, next up on the list we have Fao. Fao is a fighter, ranger, and a traveler. Now, Fao is pretty much known for her for one move in particular, and that is her grace ability, where she gains a dodge increase and applies it to all allies for 2 turns. So that is exceptional. Having a dodge increase greatly increases your survivability. She does have kind of a mini AoE, which if it has a critical hit, it decreases turn meter by 20%. Then her Ranger Brotherhood ability is that she increases her physical damage by 30% and then 5% for each living member in the party, so that is huge. And then her basic ability is one of the better basic abilities in the game. She recovers 20% turn meter, but if she lands a critical hit, she gains another 20%. So she's definitely a turn meter manipulation style character. But what are some things I really don't care about Fao is that her base speed is 137, so you really want to sink speed into her. Also, her health and shield combination is like 33,000, so she is extremely squishy, glass cannon type character. Her critical chance, which she is so heavily reliant on, is at 30.8%. So you're kind of torn between the damage end of it, or do we just want it to crit? And we got to get her speed, and we got to get her survivability. Her potency is at 31%, so it's not terrible, but it's not the best in the world either. So with that being said, let's see where Fao ranks for me. So like I was saying, Fao brings some good things to the table, but she comes in at a common for me. And the reason she comes in at a common is she's a very top tier common, much like that of Eric Shieldbreaker. Her grace is awesome. Her turn manipulation is great, but she is just so squishy. It's hard to keep her up, and you have to make some difficult choices to really make her effective. Do you want her to do the damage, or do you want her to remove the turn meter? And then you got to put a lot of speed on her to make her as effective as she should be. So very borderline uncommon for me because of her grace ability and turn meter manipulation, but the fact of the matter is she is the 5th character, possibly, maybe not even, on a Panda squad. That is why she comes in at a very top tier common. Next up is Master Duo, and I spent a lot of time on Master Duo and Shaolin, so I'm going to make this brief. Master Duo's main ability is that he can, on his 3rd ability, he gains a counter attack, and he gives himself some crit chance and some crit damage. On his basic ability, he has a 50% chance to inflict slow. And then if they have slow, he can reduce the turn meter by 30%. His passive ability is downright awful. He's immune to blindness. That's really cool, especially if you're going up against a goblin team. And then his Path of the Tiger is another kind of, in my opinion, blah move. 3 allies recover 30% of their turn meter and gain regeneration and an armor increase for 2 turns. That's his move kit. He is really known for his slow. And you know, his base speed is 113. That's slower than most defenders. His health and shield combination is 37k, which isn't terrible at all. So he's definitely not a glass cannon. But his physical damage is at 2687, so that is definitely on the lower end of the spectrum. His potency is only at 21%, so going through that 50% slow infliction is a double tenacity potency check, so you definitely want to get him on there. You want potency on this character, and you definitely want speed on the character, but you also want him to do damage because he is essentially filling a damage dealing role. So let's see where Master Duo ranks for me. Now, Master Duo, I've gone into length, and I think if you saw my rant video, you kind of know where he comes in for me. He is a trash character. He can be used as a turn meter in a turn meter manipulation team for the dragon comp, but there are so many other people out there that I'd rather gear and put the time into than Master Duo. He's not the easiest to gear. He's definitely not the hardest. His speed sucks. His potency's terrible. And you're doing it for his basic ability alone. Just a waste of resources or waste of scrolls. Just, in my opinion, an overall trash character. That brings us to Rin the Unseen. This was the hardest character for me to place in the Panda faction. And here's why. She has some really good stuff. And she has some stuff that kind of worries me about her. She's a good character. Very good character. But where she falls for me might surprise you, might not. I might have got it right in some of your minds. Maybe I didn't. But let's get into her. But she was definitely the hardest for me to rank. So Rin the Unseen has a base speed of 155. Middle of the road. Definitely middle of the road. But her kit kind of takes care of that. Her health and shield combination is just over 40,000, so for a tactician rogue, that is pretty good. Not the best, but pretty good. Her physical damage is at 3143, which is very good. Has a potency of 1. Doesn't really go into her move kit, but if she ever gets a rework, that could be a potential issue. And her physical armor and magical armor aren't terrible to start at all. Now, her move kit, she is definitely a damage-dealing beast. She has a 3-hit on her basic, dealing 100% of physical damage. Now, one thing, especially for a damage dealer, I would like to see is that damage at the level 6, with all those blue scroll investments, you're just getting it to 100%. I definitely wish that was like 150%, 175%. Putting in all those scrolls. So I think that's kind of toned down a little bit. Now her Fan of Blades is her AoE, which is 150% of physical damage. We're seeing people's second abilities do like Ember, 275% damage. I mean, 150 on a second ability, that's where her basic should be. And then, if she does kill somebody, it cooldown is restored. And she gains 50% of her turn meter. So that is awesome. So she can keep pumping it out. So I understand why the damage isn't 275%. But at the same time, 150% just seems so lackluster. Her passive ability is that she gains counterattack and a damage increase for 2 turns. And then recovers 50% of her turn meter. That's awesome. Counterattack's great. But if you're running a single target, the counterattack really doesn't matter. You know, obviously it helps with the AoEs and things of that nature. But if you get the AoE dealer out of there, which is usually your first priority, it goes down to single damage, and then the counterattack really doesn't do much for you. And then her passive ability increases her physical damage by 15%, an additional 3% for each living panda. Again, it just seems lackluster. Her physical damage by 15%, and then you're only getting another 15% for if you put her with an all panda party. 30% increase to her physical damage. I wish it was higher. So her kit is really cool, and she is a good damage dealer. I'm not bad-mouthing her. I definitely would not remove her from a panda team if I had her 7 stars and geared up. It's just the potential for her to do so much more damage, especially being a rogue. And, you know, if they tied in maybe like an invisibility aspect where she could pair with like a Wonder Lua, that would be kind of cool, but just her damage could be so much higher. And for the lengths to get her, I wish there was more to be done with this character. So let's see where Rin the Unseen ranks for me. So as I was saying, Rin the Unseen is a very cool, very good character. And she comes in as an uncommon for me. And the reason she is uncommon, and I'm debating between uncommon and rare. She is not a common character by any stretch of the imagination, and she is not a trash character, and she is not a legendary character. So it fell in between those. But then I compared her to like a Nightingale, who's a rare. Nightingale is by far and away better. Cruel, by far and away better, brings more to all team compositions. In Ember, I'd rather have a 7-star fully geared Ember than a 7-star fully geared Rin the Unseen. So she just doesn't do enough in my mind to separate her from an uncommon to a rare. And it was very tough for me. But comparing her to my other rares I already had, she is a notch below. And that is why she falls into kind of the Snorri class. Very good damage dealer. Brings some cool stuff, but just doesn't do enough to separate her out of that uncommon category. And finally, that brings us to Kung Fu Panda Shaolin. And I'm going to make this brief and quick. He has some really, really good physical armor. It is top notch. But his base speed is 134. Absolutely freaking terrible. Health and shield combination over 40,000, and for a fighter, warrior, not bad. Critical chance is only 21%, 21.8%. Pretty low end. Potency at 16. Again, low end, doesn't really need it, but still very low. And looking at his move kit, his basic, if the target's below 50% health, he recovers 10% of his health. Okay, I mean, definitely have seen worse basics, but just kind of lackluster. And you know, we just talked about Rin the Unseen, and he deals 270% of physical damage to an enemy on his basic at level 6. I mean, that's you know, if I said, do you want 270% physical damage or 100% physical damage for all the blue scrolls you're going to sink, you're going to take the 270 all the time. So, just kind of proving my point again. Sorry. We're on Shaolin. Then, his triple serving, he attacks an enemy 3 times, and each attack deals 140% of physical damage. And the problem with the multiple attacks, and this one isn't really a good example, so let's go to the next one. His Strike of the 7 Chefs. He attacks a random enemy 7 times, dealing 100% of physical damage. That's very reliant on the dodge, accuracy aspect, which I'm not even going to pretend to understand, but it never seems to work right for me. And out of this, I probably end up getting 5 attacks or 6 attacks that land, and someone's always dodging. And the fact that it's at random, now if you could take this 7 Chef Strike here and just use it on one character, that would be really cool. That would be really, really cool move and definitely benefit him quite a bit. Then his passive, he increases his accuracy by 15% and by 5% for each living panda in the party. I mean, he does need accuracy, so it's built into his kit nice, but it's just a subpar passive ability. So where does Shaolin come in for me? So there we have it. There is the pandas. We have 3 rares, no legendaries, 2 uncommons, 2 commons, and 2 trash. Larger group, but the one that really, like I said, tore me was Rin the Unseen. But let me know in the comments below what everybody thinks. And overall, the panda faction is very good, but as we all know, they're missing a true healer. And I've said it 1,000 times, I was so hoping Lake would be the true healer for the panda faction. They could become meta under a Kinley lead with Patriarch and a healer. Whew. Crazy. Then with Rin the Unseen and Ember, it would be a really good meta team. So hopefully they're going to release a healer for the panda faction. And coming up next, we have the orcs. Man, I suck at this so much. There we go, orcs. All right, over there, orcs. We're going to work on orcs. And we're going to look at them. We're going to put them on the tier list. So that's what I got for everybody today. Don't forget about the giveaway at 650 subs. If you are not a sub, please consider subbing. It helps out the channel and myself greatly. And thank you for the support for everybody. I love y'all. I'll see you in the next one. I'm out.